Hey, welcome everyone. Hey, this is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspectives, societal impacts, or related topics. This podcast often features discussions with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I'm your host, Al Richards, and today with our amazing guest, Pierce. Pierce, how do you say your last name? Is it Ahmen?
Amen.
Ahmen. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Today we're going to be talking about it's a journey with no end. And a lot of our listeners have heard me say many, many times, my version of it is there is no finish line when it comes to working on ourselves. We can have goals and we can reach a goal and set another goal. However, when it becomes working on our own personal being, and I like to say being with the capital B and E, lowercase ing, there's constant learning. We could always improve on being a better human being. So without further ado, Pierce, my gosh, buddy, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on the show. And I want to thank my cousin Marty Swenson for connecting us. So thank you, cuz. I appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you, Marty. Marty's an exceptional human being. I've known him since 2008, and finally got to meet him in Sedona last week. So
Awesome.
yeah.
That is really good. Yeah, he when I was down there not too long ago, I don't know, a couple months ago, he actually brought you up and he
Hmm.
goes, "Hey, do you think you'd be interested in interviewing this guy?" And I'm like, "I don't know, tell me more. Let's see."
Hey, cool. And here we are.
And here we are. So here's my gosh, you've done the same thing. You have rediscovered yourself, right? You was living a life a certain way, just like I have. And then something one day, something happens to us, or we just wake up and we
Mhm.
start looking for a whole different journey, basically chasing the light instead of the darkness. Is that what happened with you?
Yeah. I only knew the dark growing up. I grew up in a very hostile, aggressive, emotionally unavailable, and even violent childhood. So I never felt safe. And that's the key to this. When I didn't feel safe, I had to go externally and find ways to feel good about myself. And some of them were healthy, some of them weren't. But I buried myself in being a workaholic and a sports, fanatic. Almost played professional baseball. But when that ended at 18, that was sort of my first midlife crisis. Like, who am I without baseball? My identity was gone. And I fell into a pretty deep depression and having lots of anxiety. Thought I wanted to become a doctor because growing up I was quite sick and I knew doctors would help people. And so that sort of started my journey. I went to college and then went to massage school and wow, realized massaging isn't about helping the other person first. It's about how to heal yourself. And that's when my journey began. And it started to unfold. Next thing I know, a woman who had been coming to see me for a year says, "You have an amazing ability to touch people's souls. I want to give you a gift for what you've done for me." And she sent me to a Tony Robbins seminar as a gift.
Holy
And
cow.
right, 20 years old walking into that. And I thought, wow, I'm doing a disservice writing prescriptions. I'd rather be a coach. And I went back to her and I said, I want to become a coach. He's offering, if you want to do what I do, I'll train you to coach for me. And at that time, I was making like 12 grand as a massage therapist, paying for college and spending 20, right? And I couldn't afford all his programs. So she gifted all of them to me because she saw something special in me. And her name was Faith.
Wow.
So, yeah. So in 2000, I graduated his coaching program, and that started my journey. I grew up really shy, ashamed, and bashful. So the only logical conclusion was for me to become a professional speaker. But that's sort of how I lived. Like everything that I feared, I had to do. And it wasn't until somebody pointed out that, wow, for 6 years, I would literally vomit 20 minutes before speaking on stage in front of people. And that takes a lot of courage and resilience and commitment and personal strength and following my intuition. I knew that was my path, even though it was extremely difficult. But that's how I broke out of my shell, was doing the very thing that I feared the most while knowing something inside of me is really tugging me to come out and expand and show up. And what changed that for me is vulnerability. And for men, that's not something that I learned growing up. My dad didn't model it, and I learned it the hard way. And I used to wear $2,000 suits on stage. And finally, one day, I just got so sick of having to be perfect and deliver the perfect speech. And the perfect speech was always the one in my head that never came out. And I called my coach because I said, I'm sick of this fear. And he said, why don't you just start the workshop talking about the birth of your daughter? And a month before that, I just delivered my daughter at the hospital. And he said, just talk about that. And I had a 60-minute talk. And at the end of that 60-minute talk, I offered them to coach with me. And I had, hundreds of PowerPoint slides, all professionally done, had to be perfect, right? And I just lost myself in the miracle of helping bring my daughter into the world. And the next thing I know, my assistant's in the back saying, you've got 5 minutes left. And that was my first experience of being vulnerable and letting people see inside of me. It was a very intimate moment. And I just said, hey, how many of you see me as someone that you respect and love enough to work with me as a business coach? And half of them raised their hand and they ran back to the room and they started coaching with me. And I didn't even get to the slides or talk about what I do. They believed in me because that was the first moment I finally did. And a couple of women came up to me afterwards and said, it's finally nice to see you. And that was the last day I ever wore a suit. And so vulnerability is required to heal and transform and change. But we have such a powerful defense mechanism that until we can drop that defense mechanism and have the support in dropping our defense mechanism, the healing can't start. And so as addicts, we get caught up in the coping mechanism and having to do everything right and not fail, or we fear going backwards. And that was the beginning of the journey. And then, I had such a strong foundation when I ran into challenges or got hooked with sleeping pills or Xanax or opiates. I was able to, as you said, find my soul or the light. And that's the biggest thing I think we're doing a disservice with people that have addiction challenges or those in a relationship with one, is that we get stuck on the problem. We get stuck on what's wrong, as opposed to who am I really underneath this all and finding ourselves. Because when you find your light and go through the darkness and reclaim your power, and you really embody that, like nothing disempowering or negative can sustain itself up against your soul. Yeah. Your soul will just blast it right out for you. And so, yes, in one sense, anytime we're stuck on the matter, getting our needs met externally, we don't have power. But as human beings, we have unlimited access to power. And when we focus on that, the addiction problem becomes our medicine, our catalyst for finding ourselves instead of the enemy.
Yeah. I like to put it this way, that we spend our life looking through a straw. That's what it seems like to me. We're not seeing the whole view, the whole picture. We're not allowing ourselves to, because we just, I don't know if you did when you was a little boy. I was always cool wanting to look like a telescope. This is really neat. Yeah. And then as I got older and started experiencing a lot of the stuff that I've experienced in my life, especially when I got involved in the recovery community, hearing all these stories, I'm like, my gosh, that's all that all of us are doing. We're looking at life through a straw. And I actually just became certified to be a crisis and recovery coach. Just finished my training 2 weeks ago, just got certified. And we're big believers on the training that I took about, it's the brain first approach. Because really, once you start changing up here, that's when everything out here starts changing and you start feeling better about yourself. And you're really digging deep to see what the whole picture is, because our brains are so amazing. We can totally change ourselves to be something amazing, but our brains can also destroy us. Mm-hmm. And it's just our own thinking, right? How we look at the world or how we look at ourselves. So that's a heck of a journey. That is really cool. How I'm a firm. Anyway, I just like to look at it as when certain things happen in our life that seem bad and bleak, They're actually some of the
Mhm.
biggest blessings you'll ever receive.
Yes. Yes. And you're right. I had the toilet paper binoculars when I
Okay.
was a little kid. They were the coolest things. And you're right. We see the world as we are. And when we only see it one way, um, we're not seeing ourselves as a whole, complete, empowered human being. We're seeing ourselves as fragmented or broken. And you're absolutely right about the brain. When the brain takes over, it's because we're in pain. In fact, I've got a slide I want to show you about, and this is for people that, for anybody, we all have a mask. And between the ages of 2 and 9, we sort of split. And what happens is we put on a mask. And that mask means we feel like we have to be somebody different for our mom and dad or society. We alter our authentic self and become, people pleasers or martyrs or rescuers. I became an achiever slash performer. And how I made, success to get out of the environment I was is I knew I had to achieve every goal and I had to perform to get it. And performers are, we're some of the most creative, but also some of the most tortured humans because we feel like we have to perform acts so that people will love us and will feel important.
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is I succeeded at it. I got people to love me by being the best athlete, by being smart, by being funny. And so now the challenge is I can't stop performing. So when the mass takes over, you're really stuck. If you look at some of the what we call leaders, in the government or CEOs, they can't take off their mask now because they'll risk losing everything because you'll see the other side to them is that they're scared. They don't accept who they are, let alone love who they are.
Yeah.
And so in my work, one thing that I discovered, I take people through a mass process. In fact, I'm here in a studio. If we could put up the slide, the second slide, I want to show you and your viewers what happens when we split from age 2 and 9 and we put on this mask is that, the second slide, this mask is extremely powerful. It's designed to protect us. And so when we start out whole, complete, and perfect, and when we get triggered by something, it's because we feel unsafe. And the 4 biggest challenges that we have is that we fear being abandoned, we've been neglected, our emotional needs have been neglected, we get rejected, by our parents, or we've been betrayed. And so here comes this mask comes on. And in fact, if you could go to on the screen, go to the presentation mode because it'll explain it a little bit better. But most people, when we get into a relationship, we don't know that we're wearing a mask. I always tease my guys. I said, when you get married, you got to take your mask with you because you're also marrying the mask and the good part of the person. And so when challenges show up in our relationships, we don't realize it's like sometimes we become another person. An addict becomes another person.
Yeah.
And if we don't know how to navigate that, we get stuck. So when the mask goes on, our defense mechanism comes up, and you probably are familiar with fight, flight, freeze, flop, and fawn. And so that's in our nervous system. Our mask is in our nervous system. And then we start to have coping strategies. And for people that like to fight, argue is a great way to cope with your pain because arguing makes us feel right. It makes us feel like we have control. And so as we go through this, go ahead and keep going to the right so the other images come up. And so we're a whole, complete, empowered being. Our mask comes on, we get triggered. Here comes our deepest fears. And they're the same with all people, whether they're on drugs, alcohol, or not, is that we have to look at what's underneath that. So what's underneath that as children is we feel helpless and powerless. So we go external to try and get our needs met. And the moment we do that, we're at risk of getting stuck in a disempowering pattern. Arguing makes us feel right. Escaping makes us feel safe. When we freeze and isolate, it makes us feel a little bit safer, non-confrontational. And when we start to fawn, we please people to get loved. That's the beginning of codependence. And so when you're wearing the mask, first you have to become so aware. Go ahead and stop and just go back to the previous screen and stop it right there, please. Thank you. So when that mask comes on, we have to learn that our body is detecting a threat. It tells the brain, put on the mask, we don't feel safe. The reason people get stuck in their head is because their body is in pain. It's because they have trauma and stored energy and emotions. And especially with men, we don't necessarily know what to do with our feelings. So we go up into our head and try to control everything, and we can get lost up there. So the process for transformation and healing this comes when we can let go and surrender and understand our feelings and our pain and take back our power. So to really focus on those emotional needs that we're meeting. And when I ask, men, what are your emotional needs? Most of them don't know, because we're always trying to get our needs met by taking action and then feeling. But the need to feel safe and the need to feel loved, to feel seen and heard. We are human beings having an experience, but we don't know how to process our experience. And when we can process our experience, the coping mechanism for drugs or alcohol no longer becomes value, because drugs and alcohol, they do meet a need temporarily. They make us feel safe. The world is great. I'm okay for a moment in my life. And so my experience in working with people is that they don't know how to feel safe, and their nervous system has been rewired to fit their mask instead of their authentic self. So when the mask takes over, from resistance, we become resistant in our body. We have to navigate ourselves back to peace and relaxation and joy and finding ourselves again. But here's the thing, the mask never goes away. It will always be there for you, because its job is to protect you. And so at some point, when we see that our mask is an ally doing everything it can to keep us alive, then it becomes our medicine. Because underneath that mask, that wound, somebody hurt us once or repeatedly, and that energy is stored in our body. We'll never forget it. And so that mask just says, hey, I'm going to project this reality that everything is good and fine. Meanwhile, I'm hurting. If we get to that hurt and we're able to free our body from it, then our mind can calm down and find peace. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I'd like to touch on that. I mean, I think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of how do I want to put this? A lot of us are afraid to be vulnerable, because, right, it's that judging. And I had to go through it myself. When I first started doing my public speaking, I remember the first time I did, I got very emotional. I was crying. I was apologizing to people afterwards. And I had people coming up going, oh, no, you actually, we could see it was real. This wasn't an act. You were being vulnerable. And when I shared my story for the first time, instead of always sharing my ex-wife's journey with alcoholism, my gosh, that opened me up so much, not even realizing it until it was over with. The person, it was on my show, and I actually had my guest co-host be the host, and I was actually the person being interviewed. And she was saying, Al, I was just watching all this weight just crumble off of you. And I wasn't even aware that it was happening. And when you're right, when we are vulnerable, that mask, like you said, is still there. However, it's not putting us in a direction we don't want to go anymore, or that we want to stay away from. It actually is helping us. And again, that mask is a blessing, because it puts us in a situation, as long as we're wanting to be able to grow if we accept it and move forward.
Yeah. There's magic in the mask. It leads us right back to the needs and what we really want when it comes up. It becomes a reminder that, hey, I don't feel safe right now. I'm feeling, neglected, and now I have a choice. In the beginning, when you're first becoming self-aware, when the mask takes over, you have no free will in the beginning. You have no choice. It's so strong, it just takes over. And so as we learn to reset our nervous system and dance with our mask, it's like, oh, in one conversation, you could be loving and joyous. And it's like, boom, oh, my mask just came on. Now I'm really triggered and upset. Let me work through this and come back to my authentic self. Then what happened to you isn't as relevant as you honoring your journey and your experience. Because as long as you're in a relationship with people, that mask is going to come on from time to time.
Yeah.
And just are okay with it and know how to navigate without making it wrong. What I found is that when you really listen to people, when they have trauma still stored in their body, their mind asks two primary questions. And it's, what's the problem, or what's my problem? And what's wrong with you, or what's wrong with me? And that's how the brain responds to stored trauma in the body. And so in my trainings, people are blown away because I'll never ask them what your problem is or what's wrong with you. Because I know that everything that happens out there, what happened to us, isn't as important as how we experienced it. And if we can connect with how we experienced it, there's where the wisdom comes from. And we can heal the experience, but we can't do anything about the event that happened. Only our relationship to it. And in the end, our essence, our soul has to come back. And when I heard you talk vulnerably and let those guards down, yeah, when you let the mask down, you're in healing mode. You know, in the beginning, when we first cried, it meant we were alive. But when we stop crying, we start dying.
Yes. Yeah, very
Crying,
well put. Yes.
yeah, crying releases our soul back into our body and helps release the pain. It's a beautiful thing. And, you know, when you're hurt, you're allowed to cry. When kids do it, when they're crying, they're actually healing.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a big fan of stopping anyone from crying when they're hurt, because they're healing. But, you know, as adults, it's not cool. We don't want people to watch us when we cry.
Well, again, because we're afraid of what other people are gonna, how they're gonna judge
Yeah.
us, right?
Yeah.
Because I've said on this show many times, God gave us all these feelings for a reason, to
Mm-hmm.
experience them. We're
Yeah.
supposed to cry. We're supposed to get anger. We're supposed to be happy. You know, we have all these feelings, and somehow society has molded us to where you have to feel shameful for being that way. You know, I had a lady on my show probably 2 years ago out of Colorado, and she said she's a coach, and she
Mm-hmm.
goes, "My 6-year-old daughter taught me something very valuable one day. Her daughter is afraid of thunder."
Mm-hmm.
And one day a storm's coming in, and her daughter grabs her blanket and curls up in a corner, and she's crying. She's like, "Stop your crying. It's just thunder. Will you just stop it?" So as a mom, she's just doing a mom thing. It's not that she was doing anything wrong that she felt, right? And then
Right.
she goes, her daughter looked at her and says, "Mommy, let me have my sad time." And she started crying again. And it all of a sudden hit her. She goes, "It hit me upside the head like a ton of bricks." She goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm not allowing her to feel her feelings. And
Yeah.
here I am as a coach, and I'm telling my daughter not to feel your feelings." So she goes, the next time it happened, there's a storm coming, and you can see the lightning in the distance and very faint thunder. And she looks at her daughter and she goes, "It looks like a storm's coming. Do you want to crawl on mom's lap and have your sad time?" And she goes, "Yes." And she crawled on her mom's lap. So
Yeah.
she allowed her to have those feelings. However,
Yeah.
especially with men, you said it earlier, Pierce, men, we are not allowed to cry. We are supposed to pull our big boy pants up, and we're supposed to tough it out, deal with it. And I am a firm believer that is why suicide rate between ages 18 and 50 or 55 is skyrocketing, because we
Yeah.
are not allowed to show our feelings.
Right. It's suppression and repression, and it's the biggest killer of humanity, because to not be able to feel our existence is the biggest threat of all, because in essence we don't exist, and we have to exist more outside of our head, you know, in our body, in our life, um, in our power, to know that we matter. And when we can't feel our existence, we have to make everyone else matter and put all our focus on taking care of them so that we have value. And so, you know, for men, we have so much unprocessed information and feelings in our body. We become stronger in our mind, and we cut ourselves off from our body, which is, you know, we cut ourselves off from feeling.
Yeah.
So in essence, we've created a world that can't feel because people don't know how to be with their own feelings. And if you don't know how to be with your own feelings, you're going to suppress everyone else's around you. And we become numb. And once we're numb, it's like, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
I'll never feel enough, right? I have to do more and more and more to feel, but I never get the feeling. So we're constantly chasing our feelings as opposed to leaning into them. And it takes courage to lean into them. I have a story of a gentleman who went through my divine masculine leadership program, and his daughter was diagnosed with hip dysplasia. She was about a year old, and she didn't have sockets in her hips. And so they have to put her in a harness to lift up her knees for 20 hours a day so that the bone literally grinds a socket, and it's painful. And he called me one day. He says, I'm rocking my daughter in a chair. She's been screaming and crying for 4 hours. I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. And I said, there isn't anything to do. You have to honor her pain. And if you feel her pain, then just start crying. Because when you start crying, you will recruit compassion for yourself. And we're not compassionate with men. And when you start becoming compassionate for yourself, you're healing. You're in the process of healing. And so he called me back an hour later and he says, you're never going to guess what happened. As soon as I started crying, let go of my pain, she stopped and looked at me and started loving me back. And I said, yeah, when we value and see somebody else's experience and just honor it for what it is and surrender this idea that we have to do something all the time for other people's emotions, we start the healing process. And it was healing for him too, because there's nothing more frustrating than a man not being able to help his child. And there's nothing you can do. Her body is learning how to make hips. It's painful. Yeah. And so that was a groundbreaking moment for him to really see that, wow, when we try to fix people, it's because we have no compassion for ourselves or for them. And we're not honoring their process and holding them to be created by the Father. And so compassion is incredibly important. And when we have compassion, we have a lot less shaming of ourselves and beating of ourselves up. And so it's much easier to be connected to others when they're going through hard times when we have self-compassion, because we can't give what we're not experiencing.
Yeah. Amen. I'm with you on that. I concur.
Cool.
So what else do you have?
So, on the next slide, this is something really powerful that when we talk about expressing ourselves and the impact of expressing ourselves, this is a study, and you'll see 3 jars, and each of them have rice in it and water. And if you communicate to one jar, I love you, the other jar, I hate you, and you just ignore and do nothing to the other jar, you get 3 different results. Over 30 days, the I love you rice really blossoms and has a nice aroma and starts to turn into rice. The I hate you jar starts to turn black and grow into fungus and mold. And the nothing jar just starts to rot. And this is a perfect example of how you show up and treat yourself and others directly impacts them. And this is great feedback, because when we ignore our emotions and our pain, we start to rot. We start to get disease, and disease grows in our body. And then we call it mental illness. And when we have hate living in our body, or anger or shame, it starts to eat away at us. And so the rice gives us feedback about how we speak and how we express ourselves. Like, these are the results. And I kind of grew up in the I'm going to ignore you, I don't like you phase. And so it was a constant fight of, wow, no one really knows how I feel or what it's like being in this family. And I don't feel like I have a voice. Another reason why I became a professional speaker. And so the impact of when we speak from our wounds versus when we speak from love. And self-love has and always will meet every human need, no matter what the circumstance or situation going on is. So I wanted to share that with you, because it's like, wow, if this is my life right here in a cup of rice, if I show up like this, here's the results. It's just that we can't see them on the inside until, we're sick or something's going wrong. But we can feel.
Oh, no, go ahead. You can what now?
I said, but we can feel it.
Yeah. I thank you for showing this, Pierce, because Dr. Emoto did the same type of test with water, where he froze the water.
Yep.
and how the crystals came out, the one with love and positive stuff. The crystals were very beautiful and
Yep.
had all kinds of amazing shapes. And then when you went to negative type words like nothing and hate and anger, they were all distorted. They looked foggy. They wasn't as clear.
Right.
I had no clue he did that same test with rice. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's like this is our relationship with ourselves and what shows up with other people. Like over time, um, it has its impact. And to really be responsible for how you treat yourself is transformational. And sometimes we get so stuck on why we're hating and trying to figure out where it came from, as opposed to creating love. What if you just loved your shame? It would have no power over you. And it would start to reveal to you the answers we're looking for. When we allow ourselves to experience our experience, no matter how intense or disliking they are, to fully experience your experience means you're in responsibility and ownership of your experience. When we resist it, we just gave all our power away to the resistance.
Yeah, so true.
And so that's the big thing, is how to navigate, to first identify when you're in resistance. And you can feel that in your body and in your language. And then to be able to relax into the resistance, even though your mind's going to say, don't give in, to relax your body into the resistance keeps you in a state of empowerment, and it allows you to have choice. And now I can just say, okay, thank you, Mass, for protecting me. I'm going to put you back in my heart. And now I can have compassion. And so it's sort of like alchemy to navigate. On the next slide, I'll show you an example when you can get really good at feeling frustrated or upset or angry, all of which are great teachers. Anger being the most awesome teacher of all, that gets suppressed the most, because anger means I don't feel seen and heard. And as a child, to feel seen and heard, it's like being ignored. It eats away at us like the rice. And so when you can navigate your feelings back to yourself, when you can experience frustration or hurt or anger and navigate back to your soul, to a place of empowerment and being grounded and really present with yourself, you're mastering self-awareness. And that means that no addiction can possibly live in your life or even have room or space to exist. And so this is an example of what navigating from frustration to appreciation looks like. And so when people really understand valuing emotions are feedback, your feelings are your direct indicator of how well you are in this moment. Just as a fun test, if your audience would ask people, just pick 10 people this week and ask them, how are you? And listen to their response, because their mind will respond before they actually sit with the question and respond with their heart and soul. Most people respond with, I'm good, I'm fine, I don't have any problems, can't complain. That's sort of their evaluation. It has nothing to do with who they are or their well-being.
Yeah.
And so I remember one time I was on my way to a business meeting. I had a company who wanted to take me on as a client and do all my marketing and promotion. It was a big, multi-million-dollar deal. And for whatever reason on the inside, I just wasn't feeling it. And I was having a hard time saying no. So I went into the meeting and I got into the elevator. And, there's about 8 of us, some women, some men. And a woman asked me, how are you? And typically when people do that, they're not really expecting much. It's just a kind of thing to say, hey, how are you? And I looked at her and I said, I'm feeling really empowered, a little shaky and nervous. I'm starting to feel frustrated, and I really don't know what I'm going to do in this meeting, but I think it's right for me to say no. And I'm sweating. And she didn't know what to say. But that was my authentic truth about how I am right there. And what was fabulous about that is the next time I saw those people, half of them won't talk to me anymore. They won't dare ask me, how are you? And the other half are like friends for life, because when you're really authentic, it automatically weeds out people that don't resonate with you, and it gets you the right people to resonate with.
Yeah.
And so it's a powerful question, because when we're living in our head, we always say, I'm good, I'm fine. But that isn't your essence. That isn't your experience of yourself. And to communicate our experience of ourselves is intimacy. And so with addiction, intimacy is one of our greatest gifts that we haven't opened up yet. And that requires some vulnerability. Intimacy is into me, I see. And when you spoke about yourself, when you were in front of those people, that was a very intimate moment. And the result was people loved you, people saw you. And that's a moment of transformation for yourself. It's a very powerful place to live, because when we are intimate with ourselves, we aren't seeking, hoping, wishing, trying, and praying to get it from some other place. We get it from source and ourselves. And that's a powerful place to live.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful place to live. And I tell you what it does to your soul inside is truly amazing. It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, when I first started doing public speaking, I had a few people say, well, if you got some dress pants, wear some dress pants, wear a tie or a nice shirt and sports jacket. And I remember one of my first really big speaking things, I'm laying out all my stuff and I'm looking at it and I'm going, this isn't me.
Yeah.
This is not me. I'm okay getting up with my cowboy boots, a pair of nice jeans, either a t-shirt or a nice shirt. That's Al Richards.
Yeah.
I'm not a Tony Robbins. I'm not a
Right.
Jim Rohn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an Oprah Winfrey. I'm Al Richards, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be as real as I am normally outside of stage. And I tell you what, it has made such a big difference because I feel more comfortable up there because, like as you said at the beginning of the show, I don't have to pretend to be somebody that I'm not because I don't want to be somebody else. I want to be me and I want to be as authentic as possible. And I still got a long ways, a good journey to go. As we
Mm-hmm.
talked about at the beginning of the show, it's part of the journey.
Yeah.
However, it's worth it.
You are absolutely worth it. And it's infinite. Like it never ends. And anytime we want something new in our life, think of a balloon and you filled your balloon up with your life, the life you want, the life you're supposed to live, the life you're trying to live. You have to let go of the past in order to create something new. And to be authentic means to really be disciplined in realizing that you don't have to alter yourself to fit in. I've worked with a lot of actors, and acting is always about being authentic and vulnerable. Like you have to move the audience. And one of the things that young actors do is they'll look at a script and say, who do I have to become in order to get the part? Whereas Denzel Washington's and Tom Hanks, they look at the script and say, is this who I am? And if it's not, they won't take the part. And I thought, wow, that's super powerful. It's hard in the beginning when you're trying to become an actor. You take any part you can get, but there's a risk if you have to alter yourself and be something you're not. And that's what I was in my business. Was people were hiring my mask, my achiever, my performer, who can do it all. And so I had to give that up. And when I did, everything started to work naturally and easy, and everything just came to me instead of me having to go perform for it. And so, yeah, the only way to do anything is authentically. And in the beginning, it's going to irritate some people's demons. And what I tell people is, look, if I'm not triggering you and your mask isn't coming up when you're around me, then I'm not living my purpose. And all our relationships, our marriages, they stop at the wall of one person who's no longer willing to be vulnerable. And when we can allow space, a safe place for people to just drop the guard, especially men, to just drop the burden and the judgment, and I have to be it all and do it all and always have the right answers. It's like, then we can actually, heal the wound and reveal it and let that be okay. Our wound has a story, and the story sounds like, if people really knew how I saw myself or what happened to me, I don't know if they could love me. Something like that. And there's your wake up call that your source of love is out there, as opposed to how do I do it from in here. And with the men I've worked with, once they don't have to protect and provide for everyone else, and they can focus on themselves when they actually see one men show up and love, come from love. Because when you're coming from love, you're not seeking it. Then all the other men just get it. Like, they often get it faster than the women's groups sometimes, because they're so hungry and ready for it. They just haven't been around enough men who are showing up from that place. And so it starts to click. And they also don't want to be the one guy left out. So they have some built-in urgency. They don't want to be the one guy least in training. I don't love myself. So they challenge themselves, which is a beautiful thing, because, you know, men, we like challenges. And so we never thought self-love would be the challenge that we really have to take on, because you'll never be able to achieve enough to get that feeling. And we live in a country that constantly keeps us chasing for feelings.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Right.
Yeah. You know, a lot of this stuff that you're talking about, Pierce, reminds me of the Cartman Triangle. Have you heard of that? The Cartman Triangle?
Mm-mm.
It's
I don't think so.
it's talked about also in the book called The Power of Ted, which is a really good book. It's a pretty short read. And the Cartman Triangle, and it's spelled with a K, Karpman, and the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom triangle with the point going down, you have the victim, you have the persecutor, and you have the rescuer.
Yes, I'm
And when
familiar with
I
that.
went through that training, it opened my eyes so much that day, because I'm going, I have been living this way all my life, all my flipping life, right? We play a victim, poor me, poor Al, this, that, and the other thing. However, then we're going and rescuing somebody that's also playing the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Or we persecute them by saying, well, why are you feeling that way? Come on, you don't need to feel this way. Just do this. Right.
Right.
So we play in that triangle every single day of our life. And it's really opened my eyes, because I'm really now conscious about it. And I will start catching myself, because I've done it all my life. I've got 60 years worth of this stuff that I've now got to start shifting to the upper triangle.
Mm-hmm.
It's great that I have the consciousness now of knowing and catching myself when I'm doing it. It has changed my life completely.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it from victim to empowered and responsible. And we don't necessarily see it, you know, growing up when we've been traumatized. In essence, we were victimized, but we stay in that state, not realizing that 20 years later, when that event or relationship is done and over with, we start to neglect ourselves and become our own victim. And it's, you know, the big difference is one is responsible for their experience, my thoughts, my feelings, my actions, but the victim is caught up in what everyone else is doing and what everyone else did to them, because that never got healed. I didn't have a voice in what happened or a say so. My experience didn't get honored. And when our experience is hurt or pain, and we're not able to address that or acknowledge it or have it acknowledged by somebody else, we remain the victim to our own feelings. And so, yeah, in essence, we are, you know, when we neglect our own feelings, we're now victimizing ourselves. And so when we get that, the cool thing is you have the power to transform it right then and there once you see it.
Yep.
And the light bulbs go off. It's like, wow, it's a beautiful moment.
It is. It's really beautiful.
So I want to share something with you I think isn't talked about enough, if at all. And, you know, there's a gift and a medicine in everything. And as I mentioned, we can, you know, get caught up in the problem, you know, ADD, OCD, anxiety, all of that. I've had them all, and I experienced them from time to time. But what if we looked at it like they were teachers? I had a gentleman come into my program about 3 years ago. He looked like the Unabomber when he first came in. And he was on, 10 different medications, bipolar, anxiety. Before he sought out help, he was taking 30 Xanax a day. I took a half a Xanax when I thought, you know, I almost had a heart attack. I took a half a Xanax. I was in bed for 12 hours of sleep. He's taking 30, plus beer, plus cocaine. And so what led to that is that when he was growing up, he his dad left and his stepdad took over, and he walked in, watched his dad was watching porn, my stepdad. And so his stepdad made him watch it and said, "You can't tell your mom." And so, like a good boy, he told his mom. And the stepdad, in return, assaulted his mom right in front of him to punish him. And so he's been holding on to that trauma, never even spoke to his mom about what happened and what he was told. And so, if we can go to the next slide, I want to introduce you to Josh. Josh is a big business owner. So now his mask is on. The way he dealt with his mask was to become successful, to make so much money so no one could ever hurt him again. Well, when you get married and have kids, your next level mask starts to show up, and your deeper wounds also start to show up. And for him, intimacy is out of the question. He doesn't even know what that is. Touching, affection, being vulnerable, these are all hard things for him. His first assignment was to massage his wife's feet, and that was super hard for him. And he works all the time, and he avoids his kids. And he avoids his kids because he's so worried that his stuff is going to impact them. So he hides it and suppresses it. But what I realized, he had so much anxiety. He would sit in the front row, and he was just turning his beard the whole time and rocking back and forth. And I'm like, wow, peace is his medicine. Like, peace is his gift. And he doesn't know what that is. He's so caught up in the anxiety. But if we really look at what anxiety means, when we stop labeling it, when we have anxiety, we have a lot of energy, motivation. We take a lot of action, and then we get burned out, exhausted. But in that moment of exhaustion, we feel calm again. And if we can stay in that calmness and expand it, anxiety leads us right to peace. There isn't a negative emotion that we could label that doesn't lead us back to God, our soul, empowerment, love, peace, or joy, if we know how to navigate it. Same with depression. It leads us right into self-expression. And so when he learned to let go of judging and trying to control and suppress and drug his anxiety and just experience it, because anxiety means I have so much energy in my body, I don't know how to let it go. And it builds up and accumulates year in and year out. And then we go into our head about it. We start creating all these stories and reasons of why, and we get stuck in it. 30 days after we showed him how to really sit in his anxiety and navigate himself back to peace, he lost 30 pounds. He's off all 10 medications. And he sold half of his business because he wants to be a stay-at-home dad now. And he sends me pictures of his kids, and he's holding his kids. And his kids are like, "Thank you for bringing my dad back. I feel loved. I didn't think he liked me for the longest time." And it's like, it's not that he didn't like you. He just was so afraid that you were going to become him. So we avoid our kids when we don't want that deeper wound to impact them. And it ends up walking them right into it. And so I think when we talk about emotions, we don't see the value in them. Everything has value. And your job is to go deeper and see it and pull out who God made you to be. And peace, joy, love, passion, those are all things that are soul birthright. We just have to do a little work to navigate it. And from time to time, it's going to suck and it's going to be hard and you're not going to want to do it. But when you find your light, your magic underneath the shame, you're whole again. And so when I work with people, I always see that self-image and bring them back to who they were before the trauma happened. And like, that's what gets me out of bed. That's what gets me doing it 300 days out of the year. Is like, you can see the radical difference in him. And he hadn't even gone to the gym or changed his diet, because when we give up the story and the pain, our habits are automatically going to change to match our authentic self.
Yeah. Amen. 100%. Yeah. It changes our DNA completely. It seems like, anyway, with my experience, it has completely changed my DNA.
Yeah. When we're wearing our mask and we're in resistance starts to slowly shut down the healthy hormones, the neurotransmitters. Our immune system breaks down from resistance, being in emotional resistance. And then life seems difficult. Everything seems hard. We used to go out and laugh and enjoy and date each other, and now we won't make time for it. So when resistance takes over in the body, it suppresses our nervous system and our immune system, and we get sick. And so to be able to surrender and appreciate our defense mechanism and think of it this way: when we get so resistant and our immune system takes over, we literally have to radiate people to get through our own immune system. Our defense mechanism, godly strong. Mm-hmm. There's a gift to that. But there, with every gift, there's a vice. And the vice is, if you stay in resistance, you're slowly destroying yourself. And so when we reset our nervous system, we reset our self-image that we were born in. It's like, all of a sudden, everything feels light. You're not swimming upstream anymore. You're floating downstream and working with, nature, working with your soul instead of, fighting against it.
Yeah. Well, and with that too, the right people start coming into your life mm-hmm. to help you in that journey. I mean, that's what I have found. There's some people that happened to be in my life 6 months ago that are no longer in my life. And it's just me being who I am and being vulnerable and being honest and saying what I need to say, not in a way of hurting anyone, but just being me. And I've seen certain people just pull themselves completely away now. However, I've gained so much more coming back.
Yeah.
So much more.
Yeah. How you show up broadcasts to other people like a frequency, and people just start aligning, and people who aren't on your frequency, start to disappear or disengage. It's like when life's not working and you're showing up ashamed and feeling dark and stressed, you'll notice that there's more traffic on the freeway at different times. Everything feels difficult. The computer doesn't work. Your kids seem more anxious than before. And it's because everyone's mirroring back to you your frequency.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes we find out later we're in a relationship with a mask. It's like, well, who is this person? It's like, well, the mask is a part of me, and so is my soul and my essence. And we have to honor both. But yeah, showing up is where the magic is. And oftentimes we don't really see how we're showing up, and we don't often feel how we're showing up. The confusing part for a lot of people is when we were or felt like we were showing up authentically, we got rejected or hurt. And we can't figure out, well, I was being authentic and real and I was loving this person, but how they responded differently than love. I said, well, sometimes when you're loving people, they don't know how to receive. So they reject it, because when you love somebody, it invites them to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they'll have to receive that love. One of the things that destroyed a lot of my relationships is I would give and protect and provide, make sure everyone else is taken care of. But I was using that as a way of controlling the relationship, so I didn't have to be vulnerable to receive. And it made people feel unworthy, like they couldn't love enough, that I was hard to love. And they were right. I was afraid to receive it, because growing up, my parents were challenged, with abuse and smoking and watching Jerry Springer. And so I was afraid to get close to them. So that manifested into a lot of unhealthy marriages and broken relationships, because I wouldn't let a woman love me. It was terrifying. So it was the best feedback I got. And I remember a couple of years ago when I was in an ayahuasca ceremony, I felt my armor, like my body was just stone. And I said, what are you showing me? And all of a sudden I see all the images of women in my life who said, you're hard to love. And I'm like, oh, wow, she's showing me my armor. I won't let anybody in, because I have to risk vulnerability, but I have to risk being hurt. But to risk that, to let go of that, brings me right to self-love. And so really what we're risking is we're risking our story that we might get hurt again.
Yeah.
And we're risking our story that, I'm wrong, or I'm ashamed. And it's a very powerful illusion that the mind will buy into. And you just have to keep reminding yourself, I have to risk, what I see as hurt in order to feel loved. And we call that a breakthrough. But I'm a big believer in, we need to build empowerment and leadership and authenticity while we're navigating our wounds, so that we can do it from a place of power When we're powerless and we start going and doing the work, it seems overwhelming and terrifying. Um, so when we come from power, there's nothing that anyone or anything can do to re-traumatize us. But the story will try to convince you otherwise.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, I've had some experiences here just recently where you see certain individuals looking for every red flag they can possibly find to help protect themselves, right? It's like, oh no, I'm not going to walk into this, and oh, there's a red flag. Oh, there's a red flag. Oh, there's a red flag. Instead of really opening up to everything, because they're missing, I like to say they're actually missing the blessings that are right there in front of you because they're
Mm-hmm.
so busy looking in one direction. Again, they're looking through that straw instead of
Yeah.
really widening their view.
Yeah. Let me find all the things wrong with you. That way I don't have to reveal mine.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I'm okay inside, right? I'm okay. It's them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
As long as it's them. Right.
no, go ahead.
It's the great way to. Oh yeah. Thank you. It's the best way to maintain being the victim while making the other person the victim and not realizing that you're the victim. And so when we've been wronged and we hide things, we find that in others, make it about them. So we look like we don't look bad. We're addicted to looking good and not looking bad. And it's shame and wounds loves to project. The wound never wants to be alone and wants everyone else to make sure that they have the same wound, as opposed to, in your aloneness is where you find self-love. But we're so afraid of being alone.
Yeah.
Truth is, emotionally, none of us are alone. Abandonment, rejection, neglect, all of it, we all have that mask. Our mask expresses itself differently, but underneath it, emotionally, we're all the same.
Amen. Amen to
Yeah.
that. And I think for a large percentage, a lot of us don't want to do the work because of what we're afraid we're going to find. We don't want to tell ourselves, oh my gosh, I have issues.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us have issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's life.
Right.
That's what helps us grow. And you have to bring these things to surface before you can move on to the next step and grow even further.
Right. Yes. The only people on this planet that don't have problems are dead. And even they got problems. There's no air conditioner down there.
Yeah. Right. Or they're freezing their butt off.
Very dirty. It's when we start to become self-aware, we realize that a lot of the problems and issues that we have are manifestations of where we're coming from and how we see ourselves. And the goal is to come back to see ourselves as authentically as we were created. And when we see that, then all of a sudden we can start to see that half of our problems will just go away naturally. And the other half are tied to our journey, are tied to our mask and our healing. So we need those as feedback. Early on in speaking, I found that the audience was always questioning me. And when I was asking my coach, he said, okay, you're speaking, you're getting back people questioning you or skepticism or doubt. Now, how are you showing up that's causing that? Because I'm always a cause of the matter. And he said, and I figured out, it's like, I'm trying to be right so that no one will argue with me. Because growing up, I had a dad who constantly tore me down. So I had to get smart and right to avoid being criticized. And so here I am trying to be right about everything and they're rejecting it. So my wound is showing up on stage as opposed to coming from love and let them figure themselves out, as opposed to me looking like the hero who has all the answers for them. And I got to tell you, it's so much more fun just letting people discover themselves instead of thinking I've got it all figured out. I try to stay away from I've got it all figured out, because once we think we got it all figured out and we have the answers to everything, the journey ends.
Yeah.
End of the journey.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, let's turn over every stone. Let's go down every hole, because wherever we go, we're going to find ourselves. We're not getting out of the fishbowl.
No, not at all. I'd like to go back to my manufacturing days. I worked in manufacturing for 24 years, and I remember doing evaluations with mechanics that worked under me. And they're like, I've been here 6 years or 5 years or 8 years, and I know everything there is to know about every one of these machines down there. And I'm like, really? I've been here 20 plus years and they still throw me a curveball. So I don't know everything there is to know. It's impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the beauty of the unknown, is that's really where all the magic is. But we're so afraid of it. It's like, well, everything came from the unknown. That's where creativity, innovation, more strength and power and courage comes from. When we get stuck in what we know, we're just running a program.
Yeah.
And that program won't work in all your relationships unless you find the right one that matches your program. But then you're going to get bored. There's going to be no life to it. Right. And so I try to stay in the unknown as much as I possibly can, because I really listen to my higher power, to my guides, to my ancestors, because I can't possibly know everything. But intuition comes from the unknown, not knowledge. And so especially with men, we've been told we have to have all the answers, so we become know-it-alls. And there's no freedom for anything else new to show up when you're always in the know. There's no new possibilities that can exist when you think you know it all.
Yeah. Amen. Well, Pierce, man, this has been a pleasure. I'm so glad that my cousin introduced us. I mean, this has been a great show. Thank you for sharing the slideshow. That was really amazing, and for your knowledge and your time, because you shared a lot of gold nuggets during this show, and
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I get to learn every single week by having guests on the show. It's kind of like my own school in a way, because I get to learn so much more and pick up on so many different things and hear so many different stories. And I love hearing people's journey. When I first started this show, after about 3 or 4 months, I'm like, no one's going to keep watching this because everybody's telling the same story. And it took me quite a while after to finally realize, oh, wait a minute, it's not the story, it's the journey. Everyone's journey is completely different. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah. Here's what I would say. I like your energy and I like your style, and I like to flow in the moment. And I think there's a great opportunity to invite your group to 10 people. If 10 people that are in your group, your community listening to you, want to go on an exclusive Costa Rican retreat for a week, it's called I Am Awake. It's the process of unmasking yourself and discovering your authentic self again, and learning how to navigate who you are in each and every moment. And the journey is extremely powerful. And I want to turn it into a documentary so that all the people who have suffered with addictions or been in a relationship who have suffered can see what's possible in their life when they go through this journey. And then we could turn around and give back to all the other people suffering from addictions or still trying to recover from it. And I'd like to invite you there too, because I think that the training that I do, I've done it for rehabs, I've done it in jails, I've done it for kids, I've done it for Christians who were upset with the church not fulfilling their promise, to entrepreneurs. And I think you would be a great trainer in it, because the work is experiential. During that week, we do 25 experiential exercises that help you see how you show up, how you see the world the way that you do, how you create your own stuckness and how the mass takes over, but also how to bring back your authentic self. So it's real world training, not lecture. And at the end, half of your problems are going to go away, and the other half you're going to see, wow, I need these, and my relationship to them is now medicine instead of being the enemy. And so I've over the past 23 years, specifically the last 5 years, I've had 100% success rate in it. Not one person's walked away not discovering their mask or being able to heal their wounds or start to love themselves. And when I first started with men, because that's what I was told to work with, the wives were calling back upset, like, where's our program? What you've done with my husband, where's our program? And so they demanded a program. So I created one for women, and now I just decided to integrate them, because in 2022, I did 25 workshops. It was literally every other weekend. And I got a little burned out. But when women call and say, I want my program, I've seen what you've done with my husband, that was the best feedback ever. And so, yeah, I'd like to give you that opportunity of 10 people. If they want to know more, I'll give you my website. It's findyourshaman.com, findyourshaman.com. If you opt in and fill out an application, to have a discussion with me and my staff. We'll take 10 people. And again, we want to make this into a documentary that's going to empower other people, but we have to transform ourselves first. Because once you've transformed, it's natural to want to give back and take the person next to you along the journey with you. That's what makes it great. Marty mentioned that I should give you a code word that's specific for your group. And the code word is shaman, SHAMAN. And if they fill out that form, they'll talk to me or Marty or someone else on my staff, and we'll discuss the process. It'll be affordable for everybody. In fact, I'll get 50% off. And it's all inclusive retreat for 5 days in a beautiful land in Costa Rica. And I know without a doubt, it will make a huge difference in living authentically, living life possibility. But it really creates such self-awareness that it's not a surprise. It should be a surprise what's showing up in your life when you really are self-aware. Because when the mask comes on, that's going to create a different set of results and experience. When you're authentic, it creates a different set of results and experiences. And to be able to see the difference and walk away feeling like, wow, it's the closest you'll come to knowing yourself without the mask in a way that's challenging, but also fun and enlightening. And that's what people really walk away with, is like, wow, my mind just keeps getting blown. And now I can see why my world has turned out the way it is and why it turns out the way I want it to when it does. And so it's the closest, most intimate you'll come to knowing yourself in a fun, challenging, wisdom-oriented way, and to do it off the grid. So you can just make you your entire focus. That's half the battle, getting people off the grid and just dropping into who they are. And the rest is easily, facilitated. So I want to offer that to you. I didn't know I was going to totally do it, but I like the way you show up. And I like what you're doing. Yeah.
And when is this event that you're talking about?
So the next one is in July.
Okay.
July 7th through the 14th. But after that, it will be every month. And I would just do it exclusively with your group. We could create our own date in July or August, whenever we want. I'll make it exclusively to your group, so we can figure that out once we get our 10 people. We'll decide dates together. That way, no one gets left behind.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure I put all that stuff down on the caption for the show, so they can see that. Yeah.
Cool.
And whatever you have that I need to put on the caption, please email that to me so I can make sure I get it on there properly.
Yeah, we'll do. Okay. Cool.
My gosh, Pierce, thank you so much, man. This has been an absolute pleasure. I do really seriously mean this. I hope to have the opportunity to meet you in person one day. I love hanging out. I felt your energy, just through the computer, even though we're doing Zoom. It's amazing how that works. And I love meeting people like that. I love hanging with people like that. That's the majority of my circle, is people that have a great attitude about life and have awesome energy, and they just want to help others, right? And help themselves in at the same time, because while they're helping others, they're actually being helped.
Right. Yeah, it's reciprocal. I'm blessed to be doing the work that I do, because I have to constantly be at my best and strip away my mask and darkness so that I can serve in the highest capacity. So the more I work with people, the more it demands I heal too. So
yeah. Amen.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you to all our listeners, all our guests, past guests, guys, man. We couldn't do this without you guys. You guys are the ones that's making this a success, and we're still growing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. Remember this: addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.